This morning, the Seton Hall Sports Poll published a finding that should be sitting at the top of every football news agenda. Among American soccer fans, the people who are always going to be the tournament's most important domestic audience, interest in the United States as a World Cup host has fallen 17 points in a single year. Not a small drift, not a marginal softening, 17 points in 12 months. A year ago, American soccer fans were genuinely excited about this. The World Cup was coming home, coming to their country, their cities, their stadiums. 32 years since 1994, a chance to show the world that football had grown into something real and lasting in American culture. That excitement was real, and it has lost 17 points in a year. The poll has other numbers worth sitting with. 1 in 5 American soccer fans believe the USMNT will reach the round of 16, just 1 in 5. World Cup ticket interest among soccer fans has dropped 10 points in 6 months. And while 33% of all Americans say they will watch the tournament, up from 26% in January, which is genuinely encouraging, the specific measure of enthusiasm for the host experience itself is the one moving in the wrong direction. This is today's story. June 6, 2026, 5 days to kickoff, and fan interest on several measurable dimensions continues to fall. Let's go through what's driving it, not with alarm, with the kind of honest accounting that this tournament has consistently deserved and only occasionally received. Start with the tickets, because the ticket story is still moving, and it moved in a very specific way this week that Newsweek covered, and that deserves proper explanation. Thousands of unsold World Cup tickets disappeared from FIFA's website in the days before this recording. Not sold, disappeared. According to ticket data, approximately 74,000 tickets were available directly through FIFA's platform on Saturday. That figure fell to 44,000, then to under 30,000. The tickets were pulled from sale without explanation. FIFA did not publicly state why. The most plausible interpretation, consistent with how ticketing operations work at major events, is that FIFA is holding inventory back from the open market to prevent visible empty seat photography in the early days of the tournament. If you have 30,000 unsold tickets publicly available 5 days before opening day, and you're a major sports organization, the last thing you want is those numbers being reported as a symbol of weak demand. Better to remove them from the visible market, manage the allocation quietly, and avoid the narrative. Whether that interpretation is correct or not, the effect is that fans who might have bought those seats at declining prices no longer have access to them. The market dynamics that had been moving in buyers' favor, prices down 24% month on month, group stage matches available for under $100, have been at least partially arrested by a supply withdrawal whose rationale was never explained. And underneath the ticket market story, there is a fan sentiment story that is more human and more significant than any pricing statistic. Ty Malugany lives in Alabama. He heard the World Cup was coming to North America and was genuinely thrilled. He described it in exactly those terms to NPR. His 4 kids have grown up watching football with him. The tournament coming to his continent, to cities within driving distance, that felt like something. And then he looked at the prices, the flights, the accommodation, the total cost of taking a family to a game in a country where the minimum hotel night near a stadium was running several $100s. And he decided he wasn't going. His biggest regret, he told NPR, is that his 4 kids won't get to see it in person. Ty Malugany is not an activist. He's not boycotting. He hasn't filed a complaint with anyone. He just did the maths, and the maths didn't work. And he represents millions of people in exactly his position. Fans who wanted to go, who would have gone in different circumstances, and who are going to watch it on television instead. Now, here is the layer of the fan interest decline that has received specific new attention this week, and it's a story that the mainstream football media has been slower to engage with than it deserves. LGBTQ+ fan groups are not attending the 2026 World Cup.
England's official LGBTQI+ supporters group, Three Lions Pride, which has around 350 members and regularly attends matches, announced in January that they would not have a visible presence at this tournament. Their statement was measured and specific. The dangerous rollback of human rights in the United States has caused significant concern for fans planning to attend, they said. They no longer believed the tournament would be a safe and inclusive environment. Their reasoning referenced Russia and Qatar, two tournaments where they had loudly raised concerns, and said it would be irresponsible of them not to raise their voices equally loudly about 2026. The German group Queer Football Fan Club, which represents a network of LGBTQ fan groups primarily across Germany, said the same thing when Sky Sports asked them directly this week. They will not have an official presence at the World Cup in the United States. Their spokesperson told Sky Sports clearly, "The pressure being placed on minorities and LGBTQ people makes it difficult to say yes." FIFA's president has marketed 2026 as the biggest and most inclusive World Cup to date. That phrase, biggest and most inclusive, has appeared in press releases, in presentations, in interviews. And the official LGBTQ supporters group of the tournament's host nation is not attending because they don't believe inclusive describes the environment their members would be entering. That contradiction is significant, not because it changes the football, but because inclusion is one of the specific values FIFA has anchored this tournament's identity to. And when the groups the word is meant to describe respond by saying they don't feel it, the word loses its weight. The Fan Voices piece that Amnesty International published this morning adds 3 more human dimensions to this picture. Mary Capron, from Canada, will attend a match in Mexico City, but told Amnesty she feels relieved to be going to the Mexican leg rather than the American one. She describes a feeling she couldn't quite put into words, something about what it means to cross into a country where the welcome feels different right now. Emre, a fan from Turkey, loves the game deeply and has followed his team to tournaments across Europe. He is not going to the 2026 World Cup. Not because Turkey didn't qualify, they did, but because the combination of cost, logistics, and the general feeling of uncertainty about travel to the United States at this particular moment made the decision for him before he even looked at ticket prices. And a third fan, a human rights researcher who has spent years documenting what happens to migrants and asylum seekers in the United States, expressed something that cuts right to the heart of what this tournament is asking of communities that love football. She said the World Cup is supposed to bring people together, but many communities are currently living in fear, and they may not feel comfortable gathering publicly. People who love football, living in fear of gathering publicly in the country hosting the World Cup. Here is where we need to hold 2 things simultaneously, because the honest version of this story contains both.
The Seton Hall poll that shows a 17-point drop in American soccer fan enthusiasm for the host experience also shows that 33% of all Americans will watch the tournament, up 7 points from the 2022 figure. American television viewership is projected to be substantially higher than any previous World Cup. Fox Sports is predicting record numbers for the USMNT's matches. Numerator's consumer research found that 32% of U.S. consumers plan to watch, up from 26% in January. There is genuine, measurable growth in American football interest that this tournament will both reflect and accelerate. The global audience picture is also, by the numbers, broadly positive. FIFA projects 6 billion engagements across broadcast, streaming, and digital, a 20% increase over Qatar 2022. With the North American time zone offering prime-time scheduling for the Americas and accessible morning viewing for Europe, the broadcast arithmetic is genuinely favorable. 73% of the world population is expected to engage with the tournament in some form. And the tickets that have disappeared from FIFA's open platform in the last week have not evaporated into the air. They are being managed, allocated, and will fill seats. The tournament will not open to half-empty stadiums. The Azteca will be full on June 11th. BMO Field will be full on June 12th. SoFi Stadium will be full on June 15th when the United States play Paraguay. But here is what the falling interest numbers represent that the attendance figures cannot fully capture. They represent a mood, a feeling, an accumulation of small decisions by Time Alugani in Alabama, by 3 Lions Pride in England, by Emre in Turkey, by the human rights researcher worried about communities gathering in public. Decisions that add up to something the stadiums alone don't reveal. The sense that this tournament invited the world and then made it difficult for parts of the world to feel genuinely welcome. That gap, Between the invitation and the welcome is what the interest numbers are measuring, and it's a gap that the football itself, however brilliant, cannot fully close from the inside. What it can do is give people a reason to watch from wherever they are, to feel connected to something larger than the disagreements around it, to remember why the sport matters in the first place. 5 days from now, the opening ceremony will happen, the ball will roll, and the story of whether this tournament is remembered for the chaos of its build-up or the beauty of its football will begin to be written on pitches in Mexico City and Toronto and Houston and beyond. We'll be watching together either way. I'd genuinely be curious where you're following this from, whether you're at the tournament, watching from home, or somewhere in between, and whether the numbers we've talked about today change how you feel about it, or whether the football cuts through all of that the moment it starts. Leave it in the comments. If this was worth your time, a like helps more than you'd think. Subscribe if you want to follow this all the way to July 19th, every angle, every day. I read everything you leave below. 5 days. The game is almost here, and whatever else this tournament is, it's going to be football.